everybody. Welcome to Storytelling Across Media. I'm Jessica Tseang. I will be your moderator today. I'm an international comics historian and also was recently seen on AMC Robert Kirkman's Secret History of Comics. Now, there's so many different mediums to tell amazing stories, but our focus for today will be storytelling across comics. And I'm super excited to bring to Comic-Con International and the Comic-Con Museum for 2020 this year, 3 amazing people who have done legendary things in the comics industry. So first and foremost, Agnes, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yay, yay. So you've done you like award-winning, you are on New York Times bestseller, you do Superhero Girls, Teen Titans Go. What are some other things that you're currently working on or you were proud of?
Well, DC Superhero Girls and Teen Titans Go are what I've been currently working on and off. So I'm extremely, extremely proud of those. I had my 6-year plus run on My Little Pony. So of course, you know, that's really what got me from small indie artists to more mainstream. And IDW also gave me the opportunity to work on Care Bears. So that was a lot of fun. I've done a lot of covers, and the really exciting thing that I'm finally switching it up and I'm going more into publishing my own work. I love telling stories. I've been wanting to get back into writing since I stopped doing my webcomics. So I have an agent now, and so hopefully something in the future will come up with that. Fingers crossed. So it's going to be exciting.
That's awesome. That's congratulations on the agent. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
Yes. So Brandon Easton, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. I think like we were talking about earlier, just taking one day at a time and just trying not to check Twitter and just taking one day at a time. So this is an amazing break to actually also see people. And other than the Comic-Con panels, this is really my first time I got to really get to see friends and colleagues outside of that. But with that, over time, you did Netflix, the Cybertron, Transformers. Yes, which was your beautiful background for a while. I kind of wish there was that. You are doing Judge Dredd, Spider-Man. What other amazing things am I currently missing? Because you've done so many things that are great in the past, and you have a lot of really good works coming up.
Yeah, I mean, some of my biggest breaks were the Thundercats Warner Brothers animation show from 2011. After that, you know, I did the Disney ABC writing program, which led to me getting staffed on season 2 of Marvel's Agent Carter, which was a great experience. One of the best experiences in my career so far. And I've just been working on a lot of different graphic novels. I worked on the Andre the Giant biography called Closer to Heaven.
I love that.
Thank you.
By the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You know, I worked on, I got an Eisner Award nomination for Watson and Holmes back in 2014. And lately, like you mentioned, I've been doing a lot of work with IDW, like a lot of it, you know. Recently, Transformers Galaxies number 10 dropped this past Wednesday, which is the Ultra Magnus story arc. So it'll be 10, 11, and 12. I did a mini-series. It's issue 3 also came out this Wednesday, which was Judge Dredd False Witness, which I do believe I am the first African-American to ever write that character ever, you know, which is pretty crazy. I finished up Marvel Action Spider-Man, and currently I'm working on Star Trek Year 5. We're in the final stretch of that series too. So it's been a lot of really cool stuff coming along. I worked on a Black Panther animated series. I think that was season 5 of Avengers Assemble for Disney and Marvel Entertainment. And it's been a lot of like Vampire Hunter D. I adapted that recently, you know, as a TV pilot. And stuff like that. So I've just been like jumping around different genres and different mediums. And I just recently also wrote a screenplay for a Chinese production company. So things have been pretty cool as far as all that stuff goes.
Yes, you've done an interview recently with a great like press outlet over in China. You also won 3 Glyph Awards.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Look at you. You're like, I forgot about the awards. You won 3 Glyph Awards. And also you did a great documentary that highlighted a lot of minority comic book writers and artists.
Oh, Brave New Souls. Yes, a documentary I did in 2013. And I just wanted to highlight new and upcoming and generally overshadowed science fiction and fantasy writers who are of African descent, you know, and, you know, African American, whatever. And they went over really well. So I try to do things, and I try to really uplift other people, because I feel like, you know, you got to pay it forward. And there's far too many people with the Highlander mentality out there. So you know, we got to get rid of them, you know.
Yes, there can only be one.
Right. Yeah, I believe that there's opportunity for everyone, as long as you got a brain, you know.
Yes, very true. And it's lonely when you get up there if that's your mentality.
Yeah, but
So
see, some people enjoy that because they can be always. There's some folks I say they never met a camera they didn't like.
That's true. It's a very good observation. And Jeffrey Veregge, last but not least, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. No, this is just awesome. I mean, we're talking about Transformers, we're talking about Care Bears. I feel like I'm a kid again. This is just an awesome conversation.
Yeah, you've done over like 100 covers for major publishers, IDW and like DC, Marvel, everything. You've also have a 15-month solo exhibition over at the Smithsonian in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. It finished up. It was really exciting. It was called Gods and Heroes. It was my take on some of Marvel's biggest characters and some of my personal favorites that I got to throw in there. It was the combination. I created two 50-foot murals for it. It was originally a 12-month show. They extended it for 15 months due to the demand, and they ended up purchasing both those pieces that they were printed on canvas for their permanent collection. So it was a really awesome experience.
Yes. And also your name kind of made the headlines in comics news was because many people say it seems like you're the forerunner for Marvel's Voices, Indigenous Voices.
I don't know if I'm the forerunner. My name is
your
there.
name popped up everywhere. Your name popped up everywhere, along with the word Smithsonian.
This was the talk that we started with CB Cebulski during the show, actually. So it was it's been a while in the workings, but yeah, it's just a wonderful experience to be part of a event that is not only showcasing native talent, but showcasing native characters as well in ways that we feel that natives want to share them and show who we are and what we can do.
Yeah. So, and with storytelling across media, one of the other medias that they focus on ours is comics, but for others is television, film, board game, video games. I know other people count photography. Those are all different ways, radio, podcasting, to tell a story. But what makes comics different than all those other mediums?
I think it's just the beauty of the sequential storytelling, like the artwork. Like when you look at a comic book, you're putting everything together. Like literally you could put everything together, because you could mix photography in there if you really want in some shape, wherefore. You could mix your own reference in there, but then you have this entire book that you have to put together, and you have to make sure it works from the start to the back. And you're not just using pictures, but you're using words, you're using all these different elements of storytelling. And just like with film, you use a lot of framing and a lot of composition. So I think that's what makes comics beautiful, is you take all these different elements and you have to make them work together to tell a story from start to end. And it's one of my favorites. I think it's very intriguing because you could just get sucked in reading so many books for hours.
That's very true. The beautiful part about comics is budget. Because if you work in television and film and you want to blow up the earth 5 times before in the first 5 minutes, in a comic book, you can do whatever you want. In a script, and I've worked on a TV show where I had an action sequence and they were like, no, we're not doing that. And I said, why? Because we can't afford it. I've never had a comic book artist tell me they can't afford it. I can't afford the artist, but in terms of like sequences, a decent illustrator can pretty much transfer whatever you believe from the script to the page. And I always script my stuff in a way that allows the artist to have more breathing space, because I'm not like Alan Moore, who writes like 55 pages for like two page sequences. I just want to get the basics down and let the illustrator tell their story too, because it's a collaborative medium. I think that the quickness of it the connection that you can have. Like when you work on a show or a movie, you could be dealing with anywhere between 15 to 55 to 200 people, and everybody will have their own idea about what you're doing. But with a comic, you have about 4 to 5 people sometimes, and you can really get the creative juices going and make sure it's locked in, and you can connect with your, you know, your creative team. So I think the comics have that, you know, in a bag, and it's absolutely fantastic to have that synergy. That's the word I'm looking for, and that's really important. Makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, that's true. So Jeffrey, what are your thoughts?
I think comics speak to something that is deep inside us from when we're children. I mean, think about as kids, when we read books, when we read comics, we're drawn to the art. We don't know the words. We don't understand them, but we understand the story. We could see panel after panel after panel, and it tells the story. It shows good versus evil. It shows intent. It shows everything that you need to understand what is going on without a single word, without understanding a single word. It's a universal language almost, and it's something that goes back to, I think, back to the earliest days when man was first drawing his latest kill on the walls of caves. When you're a kid, you just understand, you gravitate towards it, and it's something that for me has never left. After reading so many, it's relaxing. It's not like a book where you have to, when you get older, when you have to imagine, you're forced to imagine what the characters are. You already provided that context. It's just, to me, it's an ultimate form of relaxation. Everything is there. You get the interior monologues. You have subtle nuances that you can see that you can't put on screen. You can't get those interior monologues. Every time they try doing it, it always sounds weird, but in comics, it always works.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good point, is like the nuance, because you may not always be able to get that when you're listening to a podcast story or in photography, or sometimes in film, like live action, you can. Yeah. But with comics, also, you can hold the physical object closer to your face to actually zoom in and to see something if you wanted to see how an artist, you know, drew or portrayed a particular character's facial expression. So I agree.
And really quickly, I have to agree on Brendan's point about how he does his scripts. Any writer that trusts his artist and we can collab together, I think that's also what's the beauty about comics, is a beautiful collaboration coming together. And when everyone trusts each other to do their thing, it's just one of the most beautiful things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that trust, you get such a better product if you're all working towards having something great. Then your name isn't as important. It's the product that's important. That's the success of that. So I think that when you get teams that are with that goal, the same goal in mind, you always win. Everybody wins.
Yeah. And as you were talking, Jeffrey, everybody wins, especially when something beautiful come together. A great writer, a great artist, they both trust each other. Name a comic book story arc that really changed you when you read it, whether it's how you chose to go in your career journey or it just stuck with you and you just absolutely loved it and you don't mind rereading it over and over again.
Mine is Kingdom Come, Mark Waid and Alex Ross. To me, it's just a beautiful synergy of words and art. It's just so, and I'm a huge Mark Waid fan in general. I loved his JLA stuff. The Tower of Babel was awesome. To me, it showcased how Batman is the greatest hero of all, that he answers the question, could he take down the JLA? Yeah, he can. So, but it's like Mark Waid, Kingdom Come for me is my favorite series.
Yeah. Just
beautiful. It showed me that comic books could be considered more than just art, more than just comics, but I'm trying to think of the right word for this.
You're trying to say he transcended the comic medium into...
Thank you so much. Yeah,
Brandon, I saw you had a reaction the moment that question was going. Dude, what is your stuff?
I don't have one. I mean, it's very difficult to narrow that down. I would say, honestly, it would be the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko run on the original Amazing Spider-Man in the 60s. Because I was very similar to Peter Parker in the sense that I was a science nerd. and wasn't afraid to be one, you know, and I never felt bad about raising my hand in class when sometimes that wasn't always the easiest thing to do, because, you know, you could get chastised for just being, you know, not a moron, you know. That's number one. But I'd say on a more mature level, I would say would be the Chris Claremont, John Byrne run of the Uncanny X-Men in the early 80s, leading up to and including the Dark Phoenix saga, because there was foreshadowing, there was character building, there was extreme logic in behavior that I haven't quite seen since. Overall, I mean, there's some great stuff being produced, obviously, but when you look at the entirety of that run, from the first issue to the last, to their farewell issues, it's what they did with Jean Grey, what they did with Kitty Pryde, with introducing all those new characters and then giving them distinct personalities that still ring true. I mean, they really haven't evolved the X-Men that much past what Chris Claremont and John Byrne did back in the early 80s, with the exception of making Cyclops more of a jackass a little bit. But beyond that, you know, I would say that and I never had a comic book death affect me the way that Jean Grey's passing affected me, you know, and I was a kid then, and I was just like, oh my, I mean, it actually hurt. And so that definitely changed the way I viewed what you could achieve on a printed page, you know?
Yeah. Brandon, I do see you have the Superman poster in the back. So when he passed, when he died in the comics, were you just like, no, this was,
I was not happy at the time, but I was a lot older. I was a lot older and I understood the business of it. So I knew he was coming back. But if I was like, if it put like my 9-year-old self in 1991 or whatever year that was, I would have probably freaked out, you know. But I'm a huge Superman fan. I was going to also say John Byrne's run on the Man of Steel comic, you know, when he rebooted him after the Crisis. You know, Superman is a notoriously difficult character to write. So the fact that Byrne was able to pull that off, and, you know, that's it. So that's it for me.
So Agnes, what about you?
Well, there's really two that I could stand on top of my head because they both impact me at different stages of my life. One of the first books I bought, which was already a sign that I was going to become a comic collector, because the moment little girl Agnes chipped a corner of this comic, she saved up her allowance again to go buy a second one. And that's how you knew right off the bat where my life was going. But in the 90s, Marvel put out the comic Rogue. It was like a 4-issue miniseries. I think it was Howard McKee and Mike Ringo were the creative team on that. And it was one of the first solo female comics I read. That and Supergirl, there was a cover of Supergirl holding a skateboard. That was the reason I got into Supergirl, because she was the coolest. But those two, as a girl, I was like, who are these women? I want to know everything about them. And I was already obsessed with Rogue from the X-Men series back in the 90s. So that book really, as a kid, set me on the path of, I love comic books and I think this will stick with me for life. And it really did. And then as I was starting out my career, I was given the book We Three by Frank Whiteley and Grant Morrison. And visually that book was just stunning. The way the panels were laid out and the storytelling was done was so different than anything I read before that it just stuck with me. And the story, I pretty much think I cried through almost reading the whole book. So as an emotional level impacted me, and as an artist, it was just visually stunning. And I ended up referencing a lot of the way the storytelling, and I kept studying that book. Like, look at how different this is. Oh, you could really break panels. You could do all these different things, which I didn't think of beforehand. So I think those are really just some that stood out for me for very different reasons.
So when it comes to a story, when you guys approach it in comics, whether as an artist point of view, whether you're reading, as an artist and writer, whether you're reading someone else's series, or whether you've been given a script, how do you approach a brand new story? How do you break it down? Like, what are the first elements you look for?
It's a good one. For me, it's a little different if I'm reading a story and if I'm given a script, because when I'm given a script, I don't have images to go along with it. I make up the images in my head, and I describe my process like when I'm reading a script is I actually have a movie playing in my head as I read it. And when the script flows and I really got a feel for the script, it's like this, the movie continues. And the moment that there's something in the script that doesn't work or I need to redo it, it's almost like someone hits the pause button in my head. And I'm like, okay, so this doesn't work. This has to be adjusted because the movie's not flowing consistently. Because that's how my brain interprets the scripts. It plays them out and makes sure that everything flows. And I feel that if it's something in my brain stops in the fluidity of it, that means whoever's reading it, most likely they'll have that same moment as me. So that's the way I approach my scripts, is I make sure that everything flows. I lay everything out. And the very important thing is I want to give readers a reason to turn the page. And I guess that also, that aspect of it also goes when I read the books. Do I want to turn the page? Do I want to know what happens next? Like, I become very invested, not only in the storyline, but the characters themselves. And I want to know what happens next. My eye automatically moves to the next panel, then moves to the next page. And I think that's very important in any way of storytelling. And when a story does that really good, I remember it, because then I'm like, okay, let me reference that back and see how they solve this problem, which is something I might be experiencing, and how can I tell the story better? So it really is about making sure everything flows, and I become invested in it.
Yeah.
I think you, not to chime in here, I think you brought back, this goes back to your first question about what makes comics special, and that's one of the things that makes special is a participation, that the reader is now a participant. He or she is no longer just watching. You have to turn the page. You have to physically want to keep reading. And just like any book, but great storytellers, both artists and writers, will work together in creating that urge, that desire for you to keep continuing to move forward, that you want to give. They give you that little teaser at the end, turn the page. You got to see what's on the next page.
Right. That's very, I mean, everything everybody's saying is absolutely true. I would also add in the emotional hook, because really all the plots and all the twists and all that stuff are great. But usually what I do is I ask myself, what does this character want versus what this character needs? And when you answer those questions, that kind of gives you the emotional hook, whether it be Star Wars, The Wizard of Oz, it could be Harry Potter, it could be, what was that movie, Fever Pitch, with, Drew Barrymore and Jimmy Fallon. What it really comes down to ultimately is, why do people care? And what'll make people care is usually some kind of emotional connection or some kind of emotional hook. That, in Star Wars, it's, wanting to get off the farm, and Harry Potter is wanting to get out from beneath the staircase, and so forth. Even in Training Day with Denzel Washington, it's, wanting to survive a day. Ethan Hawke's character wants to live to the end of the day. And that's an emotional hook. So the trick is, I try to front load some kind of emotional question or dilemma in the structure, so that when folks read it, it'll be like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. And as long as people know what it feels like, the empathy and compassion side of it, that kind of drags you in. And what you see a lot of missing in comics now, and missing in a lot of comics, is the lack of an emotional hook, which is why, certain things have the hook of nostalgia and good storytelling. Like My Little Pony, for example, has managed to hook people across the board. Like, the great majority of the fans are fantastic, but then you have the lunatic fans, but they're hooked in too, and it's something that drags them in. So I just feel that, My Little Pony, Transformers, you could talk about Doc McStuffins, all these things, which are extremely popular, because Doc McStuffins is like a global powerhouse. I wasn't even aware, but there's something in it that's an emotional hook. And once you unravel that, whatever it is, it could be something as simple as, I want to go play baseball today, but that's a feeling. As long as it's something like that, I feel like that helps me. Once I answer that question, the rest of it comes pretty easy, most of the time. Most of the time.
I like, because you talk about villains. That's what makes it great villains. There are the ones that you can relate to, the ones that you go, oh, I get that. I understand now. He's not evil because he's evil. He's evil because he or she, something traumatic happened in their life and transformed them and skewed their view of the world or the universe. And they're just trying to write that. I mean, those are the best villains to me, is when you add that touch of humanity. I mean, also think about, what would Superman be without Lois Lane? It's a love story. You got to have love in there. You got to have that.
You know, the great question is, what would Superman be without Ma and Pa Kent? You know, because without them, he would be, you know, Darkseid, basically.
Yeah.
So, you know, like one of my friends said, I didn't come up with this. One of my friends did. He said the true heroes of the DC universe are Ma and Pa Kent, because if they were like, if he landed in the wrong place at the wrong time, good Lord.
They gave him his humanity. They did. They gave him his humanity and his values, and yeah, totally spot on. I love that.
Yeah, and we've seen alternate stories and also Elseworlds where he does not land in Kansas.
Right.
So, yeah. And those are very compelling as well, because we know who he is. So watching this completely different version that's just so close, had he just landed, right, with Martha and Jonathan, would have been the Superman that we know today.
Yeah, Red Sun. What was the other one where he lands in Apocalypse and becomes Darkseid's understudy sort of thing? There's been some great Superman stories like that, and subconsciously or deep down, you know that he's so good that because of Mom Pa Kent, now those are easier to grasp, those stories.
That's very true. And a lot of questions that I get, one frequently asked question I get from a lot of creators that want to break in or to improve themselves. They want to not fall into the pitfalls and traps of stereotypes and tropes. What are practices that you feel are the most effective ways to introduce a diverse cast of characters?
That's a tricky one, because I don't think of them as diverse. I just think of them as people, as existing, because the world I live in, when I go outside, regardless of where I am, you know, there's going to be different types of people, you know. I think that when people put, you know, I guess I don't know, if people like have a self-fulfilling prophecy of stereotyping, they'll do that, you know, because you go into it overthinking it. You know, I got to have this person. I call it Sesame Street casting, which is a good thing. But when you do Sesame Street casting in your story, it can get really stupid, you know, very quickly. Obviously, if you're telling a story about 1930s black sharecroppers, or like Tulsa in the Watchmen series, which really, you know, the opening sequence, which really happened in real world, you know, obviously it doesn't make sense to have, you know, people from Sweden there, right? Because that's not what happened. But if you're telling a futuristic story, and particularly if you look at the demographic nature of where we're going as a planet, you know, Star Trek shouldn't look the way it looks. You know, people should be a lot browner and more mixed. Not to say there won't be white people or African people, but it's going to be of a more, like, if you really wanted to do Star Trek correctly, everyone would look like Egyptian, you know, I mean, if you really wanted to do it correctly. But the reality of the business is you tell the story that can make people money. I'm thinking more on TV and film now. It's tricky because I don't ever go into a story thinking they have to be black or they have to be this or that. I try to figure out what suits the story, you know, and it's great if I pepper my universe realistically and logically with people who are not like myself, you know, and you have to be very smart about it. You know, if you go to Sesame Street casting way, it means that you're going to just throw people in there and they're going to ring hollow. And we've seen very hollow characters. That's another, because one of the biggest issues I have with movies, TV, novels, and comics is that how hollow everything feels. It doesn't feel to be enough of an emotional anchor or emotional weight in a lot of the stories we tell. And the things that really resonate are the ones where you have that. So if I have a black character and he's just there and he's talking like a 1970s, you know, like Luke Cage in the 70s, what is that going to do? You know, but if the character has a reason for being that way, and we explain that this person has had trauma or whatever it is, doesn't have to be bad. I just feel that just give a person a backstory and give them a motivation. Like, you shouldn't have a woman there just for a love interest or a man there just for a love interest. Like, a person has to have agency, so to speak. Like, why are they there? You know, I'm not trying to hit any boxes or check any, you know, hit the Bechdel test and all that stuff. No, that character has to have a reason to exist. And within that, you will check those boxes. So I think that if you round out a character starting from scratch Why are they doing? What do they need versus what does a person want versus what they need? That is the fundamental question in a lot of stories. Period. Wizard of Oz is the best example, right? So I go into it that way. So if I have Black characters or women characters or Native American or Latino or Asian, whoever, right? I'm asking what do they want versus what they need, and that is what informs how they behave. And I think that's something that people have to. Why are they doing what they're doing? If you don't have an answer for that, you need to take more time to develop your character, and that goes across the board. Period.
Yes, in any storytelling. Yeah, that was awesome. Can I say something, Brandon? I love your work, man. I'm a huge fan. The Andre the Giant book was wonderful, just wonderful. But just hearing you talk and stuff explains so much why you're such a great writer. You understand that. You understand you're a god of your own universe when you're creating that. And if you think of a role of a creator, of a god, when he puts stuff in, or he or she puts stuff into the world, each thing has a purpose, and each thing has, like you said, has a motivation. Why are they here? You can't. It's the same thing with good art. You want to throw everything into it, but the reality is, if you start losing the message. You start cluttering it with too much visuals. You lose the meaning of the piece itself. And the same thing with stereotypes. If you're just putting if you're going to put a Native American character in there, you know, I'm ready to see a Native American character with short hair. I have short hair. My son has really long hair, but I have short, and most of my family has short hair. But every Native character you see always has long hair. And it's nothing wrong with it. I understand it. I appreciate it. They're like that. But there's many of us, too, that don't, that do have short haircuts, that do that sort of thing. I just want, you know, if you're going to be approaching any kind of ethnicity, you talk to the people. You get to learn them. You learn their stories, and you incorporate some of that in there, you ground it in reality. And you use that as part of the foundation for your world building.
Mm-hmm.
Just to bounce off more on what we were saying, like everything has to have a purpose. Like everyone looks at like My Little Pony and DC superheroes, Teen Titans Go, all the characters have very different personalities for each other. But just because they're different doesn't mean they don't have a purpose. Every time you add a personality into a story, that personality is there for a reason. It's not only there to help the character grow, it influences the characters around it with that type of personality. So that's the big thing. A lot of people are like, oh, I need to have this shy character and the angry character. Okay, why? What purpose do they serve in the whole grand scheme of things? And I also tell a lot of people when they get into like designing characters, and you can't really do that right now per se, but study people in general. Like in high school in art class, we were told just to sit on a bench and just do very quick, like 5-10 second sketches of mannerisms, because once you start understanding people and body language, you could apply that into your character designs and see that diversity, because then you understand, oh, so different people will even stand differently, and that can affect the personality. So it's just always thinking very deeply and thinking about all the levels and how everything, like I said, affects everything around it.
Observation is key. Totally. I remember the teacher telling the same thing. I used to work at a bingo hall as I was in art school. So I'd sit up there on the collar stand, and I'd be up there for like half an hour, and I'd have like 30 seconds between the numbers. And so I'd be up there sketching the bingo players as they're sitting there, and people used to like it. They'd always want the sketch after I was done with it. But yeah, observation is key.
Awesome. I wish I could bring my sketch pad when I work retail, because I have this really bad habit is I love studying people and their movements. Like even at restaurants, when people do certain things, or like when people are on a date, you could already tell because of the way they grab at each other. And I find all that thing so fascinating. And I got in trouble so many times at work because I would zone out staring at the customers like a creeper. And I'm like, they're like, Agnes, why aren't you helping them? Go help them. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But I was so fascinated by the way that they looked at the clothes, the way they picked them up. And I thought every little thing was just so fascinating. And at a time like that, I wish I had my sketchbook with me too.
And think about those. Those are kind of the moments that you create, though, in the book, those little details that really makes the story sing. it's those observations. And again, we go back to why comics are such a great medium. It's because you're able to capture those nuances. You're able to focus in on them. You can have a whole panel, a whole page just for somebody holding their hand. And it's the way that they're holding it, the way they're caressing it. It says so much with so little.
Yeah. So Agnes, you touched upon it, which was observing people. I mean, not so much now, but obviously artists can in the past, or even observing animals or how they move. A lot of people love your work through DC Superhero Girls. You do a lot of Care Bears, Jim and the Holograms, Teen Titans Go. Art does provoke feeling, even if there are not text on the pages. So a lot of your characters are incredibly caring and loving, but also strong female characters. How do you capture that essence in your art?
A lot of that is in just the mannerisms and expressions the characters have. Like, one of my favorite characters to draw is Jessica Cruz in Spaced Out, because she had a very big personality arc where she had a lot of personal growth because she's very insecure. And I think that's what makes her very relatable, is because a lot of us are insecure in our own bodies. We don't feel we're good enough. And now here's this superhero with brand new powers. And now has to fight alongside all these people who know what they're doing, who have all these amazing superpowers, and they're so confident in what they do. And at the start of the comic, just even the way she stands, she usually hunched forward. Her legs are never propped up. And then she's standing beside Wonder Woman, who always stands up tall, never slouches, because she has a very confident aura around her. And I love that about designing characters and showing all those different personalities. It's something as simple as just the way they stand and talk and interact. And I really try to make every single character in the comic move differently, which can be really tricky. And at times the panels are too small, or you can't always show that. But I love those big panels where you could tell all the characters are different just by the way they stand or interact with each other. And I think that's what makes the comics so good and so fun to read, because then you're like, I really relate to that one character because she or he is just like me. And I think that's what catches a lot of people's attention in comics, and also a success is a lot of the time you catch that one character and you just relate to them so strongly. You're like, oh my God, I stand like that too. And it makes it very relatable, especially for kids comics, because kids understand what they know. And they know how they're growing up, and they know what kind of characters they like, and they know their own personality. So with My Little Pony, kids and adults will go, you know what, Pinkie Pie is just like me, and they'll forever be hooked on Pinkie Pie. I have to say Pinkie Pie because she's my favorite too, because I'm a very bubbly, klutzy, weird girl. So I think that's what makes characters really fun and relatable too.
Yeah. And so Brandon, a lot of newer writers are trying to come in. They get so paralyzed, not wanting to create a story where others might critique it as, this has been done before. This is just a regurgitation. It just seems like there is nothing new about. How do you avoid that in your own writing to always make something brand new and fresh and just really compelling, because you have such an expansive writing career?
Well, there's not a lot of new stories under the sun, as they say. It's all about execution, you know. Star Wars is basically Dune executed differently. You know, it's the same, almost, particularly the first movie. It's very similar. It's all about what your point of entry is and what is it you want to say. You know, if you're just ripping off something else, then no, but you have to have a voice. And what I mean by voice is don't worry about what other people have done, you know, but be concerned about what it is you want to say about the human condition or about life. It could be, again, it could be something as simple as I want to go play baseball. It could be something as simple as I don't want to live on my farm anymore because I'm in the middle of a tornado alley. You know, like in The Wizard of Oz, you know, because nobody was listening to Dorothy. They treated her like she was a moron. She was not, but they treated her that way. And she didn't want to be there anymore, you know? It really just goes down to not worrying about the plot, because everybody's more worried about plot than they are tone and theme. It's always like, what happens? Well, you can have anything happen. I mean, Pacific Rim, I mean, how many times they've told that same story in mecha animes? It's the same damn thing over and over again. But with Pacific Rim, whether it's Gundam, whether it's, I'm going to get really mech geeky, like Votoms, whether it's Evangelion. You know, Evangelion, for example, this is the best example. Evangelion starts off as a typical teen angst-ridden giant robot epic that's become something completely abusive to the fan base, but that's okay. we accepted it. But the point being is that what Hideki Anno did was execute it differently. Halfway through, he personified depression. And then that became the story all the way up till, the many, many bizarre endings of Evangelion. So I feel like my best advice to any neophyte writer is don't worry so much about the plot, but what is it you want to say about the world? Obviously, there has to be a pretty compelling story. You want to achieve something, tear something down, win or lose, whatever the case may be. But in the middle of it, why should I care? Ultimately, that's it. There's so many stories out there like that. Like whether you're talking about like the first Superman movie is really about a quest for humanity. Instead of being a quest for herodom, he's trying to figure out how to be a person. That's what the story is. And the way you execute it is the difference between Superman 1 from 1978 and Man of Steel, which different people have different reactions to. But the point is, it's the same story, but executed very differently. You see what I mean? It's how you execute it. Batman has had 15 billion movies, same story over and over again, right? But how do they execute? Tim Burton does not execute the same way as Christopher Nolan or Matt Reeves will for the new one. You know what I'm saying? So I would say educate yourself on the history of the medium first. I can't tell you how many writers I run into who don't read screenplays, who don't read books. Number one, books. They don't read books. It's bizarre, right? I know artists who don't study anatomy properly. Like they don't pay attention to the basics. Like if you don't just, I always say this, if you want to understand division in mathematics, you have to basically understand addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Division is the next one on that path. But so many people want to jump to like long division and calculus without mastering addition and subtraction, metaphorically speaking. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So I feel that watch great movies, read great books, listen to good music. I mean, all kinds of things outside. Also, watch and listen to things outside of your wheelhouse, right?
Yes.
Like
totally.
I generally am a huge science fiction, particularly space opera. Like I'm very much into like the Dune and the 2001s and the Interstellars. Like that's the type of stuff I really am into. And if you get into that hardcore anime, there's a great anime series called Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which is hard as everything I'd ever want to do. It's already been done, but the Japanese did it already, and I'm just like, God damn it, that's what I wanted. This is the story I want to tell. But I'll also watch romantic comedies, which is not normally my wheelhouse, but I watch them because you can learn a lot about storytelling, particularly character motivations. The great romantic comedies. I'm not talking about the dumb stuff, but the great stuff, the old stuff, the stuff with Cary Grant, and it was like His Gal Friday, stuff like that, or the original, the one with like they remade it with when they meet on top of the Fair to Remember. Like there's stuff you can watch that will teach you what mistakes not to make. Also, and I always recommend Stephen King's book on writing, his autobiography, which also is a guide to how to write fiction. And in that book, Stephen King talks a lot about how he took the pain of his life, the drug addiction, and put it into his stories, like the Tommyknockers or Needful Things or the Langoliers and all these other things where you have to give something to get something, right? That's a theme for a lot of Stephen King books, right? Turns out he's talking about cocaine because cocaine gave him the ability to write 1,000-page books, but it also almost ended his life, So it's stuff like that I think new writers need to be concerned with rather, because the people, they ask the wrong questions. They'll be like, well, what if somebody steals my idea? Nobody wants to steal your idea. Trust me. If somebody's already established, they don't need your idea. They worry about, if it's going to sound like something. I'm like, look, just get a goddamn first draft done.
Yeah.
That's number one for me. Beyond all the other stuff I've said, just get the goddamn thing done. Like, get your first draft done. You can make all the changes. But if you don't have a first draft, you do not have a product. And this is not my belief, but according to the marketplace, if you don't have a product, you don't count. You don't exist. Yes. So get your work done, get offline, stop complaining, stop fighting people about whatever you believe in, just do your work. That's my best advice. Get it done. And that's it.
Yes. I love that mic drop. I literally saw it in my eyes as you're like, just finish it and don't be online arguing. Because time could be so much better spent, like you said, even absorbing other mediums, other genres that you're not, typically into.
Right.
So, yeah. And Jeffrey, just because it's so recent and I had so many people flood my inbox, they're like, it's our time. I'm so excited. Marvel's Voices, Indigenous Voices. How is this something that's going to be different and brand new from other, successful, depending on who you speak to, attempts from other publishers in terms of creative Native American characters?
You have natives lending an authentic voice to Native characters that weren't necessarily created by Native Americans. You're allowing us to add our influence and the things that make us who we are that people don't know about. That there's nuances to Native. That's what originally brought me to Marvel with Red Wolf, was not just me doing the covers, but it was to try to add authenticity to the character, to give him more depth. And that's what I think what we'll be seeing with Native Voices is a certain amount of depth that we have not seen in Native American characters ever. That most of the time, like I said, we're very, very stereotyped from the costumes that they're given, to their hair, to the way that they talk. And here we're saying, okay, some of these are okay, but we're going to take it and we're going to show you what they would be if they really grew up on a reservation, if they really grew up with a Native family, and how that would shape and mold them as characters and as people.
Yeah.
Marvel's been very good about doing that sort of thing. Everything that from Red Wolf, I was working with every suggestion I ever made with them on how the characters talked, what the artist was thinking about putting them in, like clothing wise and costumes. And, I would tell them, I don't know many natives that would do that, and they always respected that. They've always respected that they want to make sure that when native audience reads it, they get it, they understand it. When a non-native reads it, they get an understanding of better who we are.
So as something that people are very excited about, when should we be expecting that? And also, where can we find more of you online, Jeffrey?
That should be coming out in November, as well as I'm doing 8 more covers. I did 8 covers for the various books for that month. Everything from Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Spidey. There's Black Panther. It was awesome. I got to do all the characters that I really wanted, but they're all coming out in November. I'm also working on Star Trek for IDW right now, and I'll be doing Transformers as well with them soon, and Rick and Morty as well. And I can be found on Twitter, Jeffrey Veregge, or Facebook. And I have a website, jeffreyveregge.com. Also, I'm working on a new mural for the NHL arena here in Seattle. I do a lot of public artwork too, where I'm creating for the new NHL arena for the Seattle Kraken. So it's a big 35-foot mural that I'm designing, 3 stories. I'm pretty excited about that.
That's so
my goodness, that's amazing. When will that finish?
I'm currently in design right now with it. It's first phase, so it's supposed to be by next year it'll be up. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Amazing. And so, Brandon, where can we find more of your work, or any shameless plug, any future announcements?
Well, right now, Transformers War for Cybertron Siege Season 1 is on Netflix right now. Dropped on July 30-something. Well, it was a long time ago. Transformers Galaxies is currently issues 10 and 11 will be, I believe 10 is in stores now, 11 is coming. Marvel Action Spider-Man, it was a very short run because we got, shut down because of COVID. That's currently available in stores as well. Judge Dredd False Witness. I'm working on a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, I can't discuss that. They're going to be
okay.
Soon. But I can be found generally on, I'm mainly on Twitter. So at Brandon Easton. You can also find me on Facebook, but I avoid Facebook other than just to make random announcements because people are just losing their minds. Instagram is a good spot to find me, at Brandon Easton Writer, like it sounds. And yeah, and like I still do a couple of podcasts. I do Writing for Rookies, which is like my advice podcast, which also has served as like an autobiography since 2005. It's weird. And I do the Two Brandons podcast with writer Brandon Thomas. So yeah, I mean, I'm out there. I'm definitely always happy to talk to folks. I mean, I miss the convention scene quite a bit because that's where I would actually meet folk and press the flesh, as they say, and get to talk to people. And that's about it. I mean, I think the Vampire Hunter D project I worked on a couple of years ago, the graphic novel has been completed from Unified Pictures. So that's going to be dropping within 2021, definitely. And a few other things that unfortunately I can't talk about, but just keep an eye on things. I'll have some pretty big announcements soon.
Yeah, and that's why they have to follow you on social media, because
Absolutely.
That's where the announcements are going to be, or they can listen for all of your nuggets of wisdom that you dropped on here.
Nuggets of something out.
And Agnes, where can people find more of you online, or anything that you want to just talk about that you have upcoming?
I'm relatively easy to find across social medias because it's all just Agnes Garbowska. So just look up Agnes Garbowska, and hopefully the spelling of that will be somewhere because my last name is a traditional Polish last name, so it's hard to spell, and it's how we are. We like to make things difficult. If you look me up on Facebook, just add a little .art to that, so agnesgarbowska.art. My website, agnesgarbowska.com. It's all the same, but if you go there, that's where you can find links to just about everything else. You can find links to my Patreon, where I give a lot of process work, a lot of behind the scenes. I explain a lot of my process while giving tips, especially to new creators. So if you are someone interested in learning more about what I do and how I do it, and just learning little things here and there, please give my Patreon a little love. I also have a YouTube, which you can link through there, that I have over 20 how to draw videos of a lot of popular characters, because I used to live stream for a while. But there's a lot of step-by-step where, of course, I explain a lot of the process, why I do. So you might learn even color theory, because I talk a lot about colors when I do the watercolor painting. So just everything's my name, pretty Googleable. So everything is a little bit different. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll get a little bit different than Twitter, just because I do different things on different ones. But I just like trying to be active with my fans, especially now that I can't interact in person. So at least with social media, we still have a little bit of that interaction going on, which is, I think, keeping us all sane.
Yeah, and you all can find me, Jessica, on Facebook. Please send me an inbox message so I know you're not a rando. And you can tell everybody that you saw me with Brandon, Jeffrey, and Agnes here for Comic-Con International's Storytelling Across Media. This is the comics edition. So thank you everybody for watching, and hopefully I know you guys got lots of wisdom and lots of great things. So like Brandon said, go out and just do the work, just finish it. So we're so excited, and thank you again for having us. Bye.
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 Bye. Live long and prosper.
So awesome.